composer Jean-Jacques Rousseau said, "Patience is bitter, but its fruit is sweet." This is the Producers Lounge podcast. I'm your host, Richard Tucci, and on this week's episode, we have line producer and UPM, Stephen Marinaccio. I first met Stephen at a Producers Guild workshop for line producing, and I found he was a fantastic and knowledgeable man. He identifies more as a production manager, but as you'll hear in this interview, his skill set is broad and accomplished. His website, lineproducing.com, is also celebrating its 10-year anniversary, so check out the site for a special competition. And now, my interview with Stephen Marinaccio.
Yeah, I don't really get into those MMOs, especially just because of the cost. And being that I work on location a lot, then suddenly I don't have access, and then I'm working, so I shouldn't really be playing games. So it's
Gotcha.
It's one of those like.
Are you pretty? What is your annual schedule like? You work 40, 50 weeks a year because you're freelance.
I wish. Yeah, I mean, usually it works out to be probably 6 or 7 months of the year, and then the rest I'm quote unquote unemployed, but I'm always doing budgets or consulting with people and doing schedules for them, and like right now I'm in between shows, that proverbial term, in between shows, but I'm working on 2 budgets at the moment for projects, and doing a bunch of other side things for myself. So yeah, but
cool.
Yeah, I wish that I could work 50 weeks a year. So yeah, I would if I could, but no.
No, I was having the same problem for a long time, where I got into this good rhythm for a while right before the recession, where I was doing coordinating or line producing on either indie features or reality TV.
Right.
And then I did like 2 reality shows a year and 1 indie feature. But it was like a micro budget, so
yeah.
You know how those pay.
Oh, yeah, micro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the beginning.
Okay.
I'm curious, so when did you get interested in film?
Oh, like many people, it starts as one of those stories of like before I remember. It was, but I do remember I was really young. It must have been maybe I was 7 or 8, and my parents had these, the old school 8mm projectors and films and stuff. And there was this one with the rabbit and the hare, with the race, and it was a cartoon, and they used to play it, and it was one of those like family nights, and we're gonna project on the wall and stuff, and I remember thinking to myself that I didn't like a particular scene. I don't remember the specific scene. I just remember I remember when I was a kid I didn't like the scene. So one day when I don't know what my parents were doing and they weren't watching me, I took out the thing and I started looking at all the celluloid frames, and I cut out, just with scissors, I cut it out, and then I took some Scotch tape and I put it together. And then, of course, it wouldn't work because I didn't understand the concept of sprocket holes and clean cuts and all that stuff, because I'm like 8. Yeah. And so my parents thought that I ruined the thing, but that was like my first foray in the idea of what I didn't know was called editing. And so then, anyway, that progressed, and as I grew up, then there was the cameras in the house, and so we would take home videos and stuff, and I remember sitting in front of the TV one day, and I would always critique commercials. I would always say like, oh, this would have been funnier if they did this last tag scene, or that didn't work at all. And I remember my dad once getting mad at me because, of course, I'm talking out loud while we're watching commercials and television, and he says, listen, you just calm down. It's a commercial. Just let it go. If you think you can do better, do it. But otherwise, hush, okay? Yeah. And that was sort of an impetus to me to say, yeah, I do think I can do better. So I'm going to learn about how they do this, and I'm going to make ads for a living, because I'm going to make commercials, so I can make them better. And then that led to other things, and I started doing research about how, things were made, and of course, let's not forget this small type movie that was called, I don't know if you've seen it. It's more of a cult phenomena. It's called Star Wars.
Oh yeah, I think I've heard of that.
Yeah.
I think they're doing a Kickstarter campaign for
that.
Yeah,
they might be coming out with a remake. But like a gajillion people in the film industry, Star Wars was an impetus to like love special effects and the visual effects aspect, and just movies in general, and having fun at the theater. So I was actually I was a Boy Scout when I was younger, of course, and when during the summers I would work at this summer camp, and there was a medic that worked there. Our medics were always on loan from the Army, so it was sort of their training on on location. So they would come up and tend to us Boy Scouts. So, but I worked as a staff member at this Boy Scout camp, and this medic was going to school for film. And he and I started talking one day about commercials and filming and all this stuff. And he sat me down and over the course of a couple weeks, told me all the basics of like what a close-up shot is, what a medium shot is, how you do a storyboard. And we worked out this little commercial that we actually went out in the woods and shot. It was a really rudimentary Coke commercial, and but it was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot. And then, progressing on then into high school, I took some classes on editing and film production and stuff like that, or at the time video production with the old school VHS machines and such. And so I just progressed, and I've just always been into it. So
when did you decide you were going to move away from just being a filmmaker and a commercial creator to specifically line producing?
Oh, that actually happened. To get to that point, let me tell you this a little bit, is that I was in college, and I went to a community college because I couldn't afford a 4-year college right off the bat. So I went to community college, but when I was going to community college, I actually worked at a local CBS affiliate. Okay. And at that CBS affiliate, it was a non-union shop, so you were able to do lots of things. I ran camera, I adjusted lights, I built sets, I ran the switcher boards and stuff like that. And over time, I got to a point where I was actually the director of weekend news. So it was a lot of fun. So I was in control of the airwaves for a half hour and such. I knew always that I didn't want to be in news. I wanted to make movies. But I tell you that it leads to the fact that when I then did go to college, I had this background and understanding of like the mechanics of the real world. And there was a movie that came to town that I applied for, and I worked on the set, and I busted my butt making sure that I knew how it operated. And so that started my career on the set side, from PA to first AD. So this all leads to your question. I was on a movie, and I was a first AD. It was a really tiny movie. You've never heard of it.
This is still in Northern California?
This is in Southern California now.
Okay.
I've now moved to Southern California. We're shooting this movie in Barstow. And it's a small movie called Dead Giveaway. You've never seen it. You've never heard of it. But it happened. And but
it was an experience.
It was an experience, but I was working as an AD on it, and it was one of those super low budget. In today's term, a term didn't exist back then, but in today's terms, it would be a micro budget project, and everybody basically working for deferred or free for experience. And so again, I was a second AD on that film, and the coordinator and the UPM both quit on the same day. Now, keep in mind, this is way back in the day when not everybody had their own laptops. There's no iPads. There's no, internet upload, iCloud stuff. I was the guy who went into the office every night or each morning and worked on the one PC that was in the office and made the call sheets and or the production reports, depending on what it was at the time of day. So, of course, then the producers looked at me and said, well, Steven, you go into the office all the time. You must know where everything is, so can you run the office and then the set? Now, what was even more particularly interesting about that is that we were shooting a lot of nights. So now they suddenly are saying, okay, well, we need you on the set at night to be the second AD, but during the day, can you put in a couple hours in the office just so that we can make sure things are going? Because we trust you. And so that was the big turning point, because there was an issue with, and this sounds innocuous. It's really simple in my eyes today, but at the time it was like a huge issue. Okay, there was a globe that needed to be replaced in a 12K. No big whoop. You call up the electric house, you get a new globe. That's it, right? Yeah. At the time, I had no clue, because remember, I was a set guy. Things just showed up. Things were just there, right? And so I had no real concept of the fact that we could a purchase order. What's that? And so I call them, and then I order it. Okay, now I have to pick it up, and then it has to get up here from LA. And how do I do it? Where's the driver, and what's their schedule? 'Cause it's going to take 2.5 hours to get to the house. They come back here. But after I did it, and the globe was on set, and the light was working again, and the electrics were like, "Hey, thanks," I was like, "Wow, that was fun. What's another challenge? What can I do? What can I help with now?" And I really dug that aspect of dealing with all those details. Now, like I said, it's innocuous. It's a globe. It's easy. But it was that was really the genesis of me loving the behind the scenes thing. It really made me realize that, you know, the set is important, of course. It's where the movie's made. But, you know, how does that camera get there? How did that crane get there? How did the craft service people get the table and even the power cords from the generator to power their toaster? Like, all those details, and who dealt with where we're going to park all this stuff, and all those details started to open up to me, and so I started over in the office as a PA. I got a job on a show, a fairly large movie called Broken Arrow, and worked my way up from PA to, you know, production secretary, assistant coordinator, and eventually then started getting my days as a UPM. So. But that was, so there's the long way of telling you my story of how I got to be a UPM. And then, you know, the line producer thing is it sort of flops back and forth. So there's the division of responsibilities there, but it really depends on the show.
So let's talk about that then. You know,
I knew this was coming.
Going into Line Producing 101.
Yeah.
Well, which, by the way, you have a fantastic website about.
Thank you. Lineproducing.com. Thank you.
10-year anniversary.
Yeah. So just to segue for a moment, the website's been up for almost 10 years. On August 11th, 2013, it will be 10 years, and I'm planning a big celebration. So definitely log in, check it out. There's going to be a lot of cool stuff there for people to get. I'm doing a bunch of giveaways, nice. So yeah, log in, and there's a whole list of things that you can do to sort of earn more points to win, potentially have a better chance of winning. So
okay.
Yeah,
wait,
it's a whole thing.
There. Hold on, I've been on lineproducing.com. Yeah. There's a competition.
There will be.
There will be.
Yeah, okay. on August 11th it will go live. It'll go from August 11th to the end of September, so about 6 weeks or so.
Okay.
And I'm going to be, there's a lot of great vendors like Entertainment Partners, Media Services, Gorilla, Ease, a bunch of other really great people have donated some stuff to the cause, and lots of great stuff to give away. So yeah, it's going to be fun.
All right.
Yeah.
So one of the things covered on that website, Line Producing 101.
Yeah.
What is the difference between a line producer and a UPM? All
right. So here, to answer that, let me give you a little history on just the term unit production manager. The unit production manager back in the day in the studio system was that in today's world we have production executives. Well, back in the day they were called production managers. When film and projects started to leave the lot and they needed units to go out off the lot and shoot various location pieces, those were called unit production managers. So you had the main production manager and then you had unit production managers. That term has stayed around today, and now you even see it flop back and forth. People just drop the unit and they're like, yeah, I'm a production manager, because now you have the executives and then the production manager. So that's the UPM part. The line producer part is more of a title or a position that you see on larger shows usually that can financially handle two people, and also logistically need two people to put their heads together and figure it all out. You handle this, you handle that. But at the beginning of the project, the line producer is the person who really does the plan, puts together the budget, makes the schedule, figures out all the details, works with the producers, and if there's a director on, works with the director to make sure that the production plan is a solid one, and then the studio or production company will move forward. Then that person would hire their UPM to then, and the clue is in the title, to manage it, to manage the production. So that's the basic difference, is that the production manager manages and the line producer produces the line items in the budget. They're on the line. So there's a lot of like sort of colloquialisms in the title, but that's the main difference. On some projects though that I've done and many people have done, is that there isn't a line producer and a UPM. So that person does both. They're just technically doing things. What title they take is between them and the producers and how they want to manage it, and if it's a DGA show and such like that. So there's a lot of, as a UPM, I feel incredibly creative in problem solving. No, I'm not necessarily saying that, hey, in this scene it would be really great if Bob said this, or what if they went over and they did this. That's not the creative side that I'm talking about. I'm just talking about, like, you're given a task to do, and realistically this is not going to be very feasible or realistically, doable. So you have to come up with, you have to think outside the box a lot of times and say, okay, well, this is the goal. This is what the director needs. This is what producers need. How do I do that? And oftentimes it's creative answers.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, and there's creativity in every department. I mean, your key grip is the person who's putting up flags and dealing with all that stuff, but it's creative. You've got to work with the gaffer and the DP and make sure that it's good. And there's a little bit of it, not a little bit, there's an art to it. You get a good key grip, and they're creative. And, then problem solving things. I've worked on many shows where, like, we have to fasten a camera to something, and you sit there and you stare at the car or the bike or whatever it is, and that key grip is going through their mind, coming up with creative ideas of how are we going to mount that speed rail to it? How are we going to, all that stuff. And it's creative, and every department is like that. But as far as a UPM and a line producer, that they're definitely creative. But yeah, I agree in general. The line producer is more the creative side because they're dealing with all that stuff ahead of time. So they're helping shape the script to fit the budget and vice versa. So, there's a lot of suggestions on the front end when I'm in that line producer role where, hey, you've got these two scenes and all the action is happening in the living room, and then they move into the kitchen, and there's really nothing extra new that's happening in the kitchen. There's no real reason. It feels like the writer just moved us into the kitchen because they didn't want to be in the living room anymore.
Yeah.
So do we need the kitchen? And I'll just sort of pose out those things to say, just consider the idea that if we could save an hour of a company move into the kitchen, because reality-wise it's going to be an hour, it's not 15 minutes, unless you have a B camera and you can, flop over to it really quickly and set that up while you're still on A camera. There's those little logistic things that you can figure out in scheduling. But, in general, okay, that's a new thing, and now we have to deal with set dressing in there. It's a kitchen, so there might be a window. So what do we see out the window? Or do I have to blow it out, or do I have to put in a blue or green screen back there? It's like there's all those kind of issues that come up to, like, just moving into new scenes. So that creative side of it is saying, okay, listen, if we can save production time and set dressing and props and all those things that mean going into the kitchen, do we really need to go into the kitchen? And sometimes you get directors that are like, you know what, yeah, I don't need to go into the kitchen, let's scrap that, pull all that dialogue into the living room, and yay, we're done. So that creative aspect is more the line producer side on the front end. Not to say that happens all the time. Usually the scripts are pretty much beloved by the director, and they are what they are, but every so often you can get a thought in.
We all know that all scripts are perfect in every way and should not be changed.
Absolutely.
Oh, never.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. No, they're clearly.
Yeah. So.
But yeah, Stoning of Soraya, I guess you're right. That is the first one that I got technically the line producer title on.
Okay.
And but that was one of those aspects, was there was no UPM and a line producer. I was both. So and the company that I worked for that did that movie, and by the way, fantastic movie. If you've never seen it, you must see it.
Is it on Netflix?
It is on Netflix. It's a spectacular film. It's one of the movies I'm most proud of working on.
Okay.
It was incredibly difficult, fundamentally challenging in every aspect, but ultimately rewarding. It's a great film. Anyway, the company I worked for that did that, I was their in-house vice president of production, so I worked in-house for them, and I did budgets and schedules all the time for them on their movies. And then when they actually did a movie, I went on location. I was their UPM. So on this one, as an enticing addition, I gained the line producer credits. So, but technically I was the UPM. Day in, day out, I was the UPM. Okay. So, because it was a DGA show as well, so that had a political aspect of technicality of being the UPM.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, backing up, you mentioned a very, very interesting point about being an in-house production exec. How did those kind of jobs come about?
First of all, they're really tough to get.
Yeah.
But this one was just sort of weirdly happenstance. The one of the gentlemen who was one of the head people in it, I worked with him on a show probably 2 years before that. on which I was really a supervisor. I was brought in by the UPM just to help out, but it was at the time that I wasn't the coordinator anymore. I was more of a UPM, so I was already doing things in my own right. But he just needed help on the project, so I said, sure, I'll come in and help out on this. And then they, the producers on it, saw that I was doing a lot of work and I could handle it. So I actually randomly bumped into him like outside of a Starbucks somewhere and said, "Oh, hey, how are you?" And we just ran into each other. And
how long after the production was this?
This is about 2 years later.
Okay.
Yeah, and we just ran into each other, and we started talking about what we were working on. And he said, "Oh, I'm teaming up with this other big producer, and we're starting our own little company. What are you working on?" I'm like, "Well, I'm working on this and that." And then probably 2 or 3 days after that, he gave me a call and said, "Would you consider coming and working for us? Because we need someone to do budgets and schedules and production plans and run all of our movies." And I thought about it, and the offer was good, and the opportunity to work on movies consistently was there, so I took it. So, and I worked for them for about 2.5 years, and during that time I worked on 3 films that got made, but probably 10 or 12 other movies that I just, in various states of pre-production
Gotcha.
planning and aspects and, stuff like that. So it was good. It was good, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So sorry to sway that far off, but
yeah, no.
back to
sway away.
Sway away.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was your first UPM credit? Or
Well, the first UPM credit, this is actually a fun story. I was working on a show with this. It's a director I don't know if you've ever heard of. He's done a couple of shows. His name is James Cameron.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you might have heard of him. Yeah, he did some. He did a boat movie. Yeah, very marine oriented.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but he's a great guy, and I worked on this movie called Ghost of the Abyss,
Mm-hmm.
and at the time I was hired as the supervisor to come in and manage all that, or supervise all of the aspects to it, which is funny because there was no production manager, nor was there a coordinator.
Uh-huh.
It was just me. So, but it was a documentary, really,
Mm-hmm.
and they were doing it in 3D on these newfangled digital cameras that
Mm-hmm.
Jim had been developing with a guy named Vince Pace and Panavision.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was working on this show, and I was on the show for a little over a year at this point, and my main producer on the project had been on it for probably 2 years at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to go down to Mexico to shoot all of the insert stage stuff and deal with set pieces and things that were there left over from Titanic.
Mm-hmm.
So, but in order to do that, we needed a budget for that. And so I stepped up and volunteered and said, I would really love to try to put together the budget and figure out the details of it. I think this would be a great small little project, little side piece that I can, put my stamp on and really get some experience. So she agreed and let me run with it, and I learned a ton. And we're sitting in, it was her and I sitting in a meeting talking about the budget and schedule, and she said, "Oh, I invited Jim to come in and talk about the project." And I was nervous. I mean, I'm not really nervous around Jim, but it was a moment where I was like, "Oh, okay, if he's going to know that I'm doing this," I thought it was really just like, you're going to run with it, I'm just doing it. And
Mm-hmm.
so Jim walks in, and I'll never forget this. It was the turning point of me saying, you know what, I really can do this, when he looked at me and said, "Oh, I thought this was going to be, just her and I talking about the budget and schedule." And she turned to Jim and said, "Well, Steve really wants to be a UPM." So I let him run with the budget, and he put it together. He's put together a good plan, and I think it's good, so let's chat it through. And he stared at me, what felt like 5 minutes, but I'm sure it was 10 seconds. But he just stared at me, and like there's this inquisitive look, and he looked at me and he said, "Why do you want to be a UPM?" And I said, "Well, I love the detail. I love putting it all together. And, there's the script, and there's things that you want to do, and there's aspects that I need to deal with, and the logistics of behind the scenes that nobody really needs to know about, but they need to be dealt with. And I love putting all that stuff together and figuring it out, and then handing you your set and say, go do it, and create and do what you do. And
here are the toys. Go have fun in the playground.
Exactly. Yeah. And obviously working with Jim, there's lots of toys and things to deal with and such, and all of them rightly so. And like I said, he just stared at me, and then he just said, "Okay, you're my UPM. What's the plan?" And then that was it. We just went into it and went down to Baja, Mexico, and shot. And it was a lot of fun too, because we would stand around in circles. It would be Jim and myself and the other producer, and he would, you know, genuinely look at me for answers. And it was a high like nothing else, and it was invigorating, and it was also incredibly, you know, high pressure.
What was the biggest problem that you encountered on that shoot?
Time. There was so much that he wanted to do, and so much that he wanted to do outside of the original plan, that there was, you know, we shoved 6 days worth of work into 5 days. But really, when I say that, it was really 6 days. There was, on the last day of shooting, he just wanted to keep going. There was so much more that he wanted to get. He added this scene here, and he wanted to get that.
The last day
there.
of the week, or
the last day of the shoot.
Oh,
of the 5th day. I think it was technically a Thursday that was the last day. We started on a Sunday, but we just kept going. And on that last day, we shot straight through for about 26 hours. Whoa. And it was intense, and there were many people on the crew that stayed up for a lot of it, but I started to cycle people out. I'm like, okay, it's been 14 hours. You go to sleep. Jim and I are going to keep running. Extras need to go away. I need to call in a new set of extras. And then we'll cycle those people out. And but it was fun. I mean, there was a minor break in there that Jim went and slept, and while we prepped up the remaining things, and I brought in. I mean, so it wasn't like the one crew worked 26 hours, but there was a moment there that we were always doing something, because he said, okay, well, if we're here, I have the equipment, I would just want to do this, let's pick it up, let's get it. And so that was a huge challenge, to make sure that seamlessly behind the scenes it was all happening, and to him it just seemed like it was super smooth, but to me my head was exploding trying to figure out the logistics of who needs to go home and sleep, who needs to have come in, how many other people do I need to bring in to do this. Is this set even clean, working out? Oh, this is a set holdover from the actual movie. We have to go down to the warehouse and pick up these pieces and bring them in. Who's going to do that? Do I have a truck? Do I have 3 people to do that? It's 3 o'clock in the morning. But again, nobody worked 26 hours straight. It was just a marathon time of cycling and making sure that things are good. Like I said, Jim did go home and sleep. He got his rest, and so did everyone on the crew. But there were so many things he wanted to get before we went back to the U.S. And so it was, you know, all these things thrown in at once. So that was probably one of the most difficult challenges that I had on that project. But, you know, you learn and grow, and you figure it out. And, you know, the next time you're able to help anticipate. And I did another project with him afterwards, after that, another documentary through his documentary company. It was actually part of, originally Ghost of the Abyss was going to be a much larger project, and then it got split up into some pieces. So Bismarck was the second piece of that. But I learned my lesson from Ghost of the Abyss, and I was ready for a lot of things on Bismarck. So make sure that we're all prepared. And I said, I know Jim is going to want this, so let's have that. Yeah. You know, so and he didn't direct the part of it that we did in North Carolina. There was another director from the UK, but Jim was still in charge.
I have to ask, have you ever had to say no to James Cameron?
Have I had to? Yes. Did I? No. No. Yeah, I mean, but you know, he's a very reasonable guy. He's pragmatic. He's super knowledgeable. I really enjoyed working with him. So I can't say anything, you know, or I can't think of anything off the top of my head that I specifically said no to. But you know, in the capacity that I worked with him as the UPM, or even on the next show as the UPM on Bismarck, I can't fathom there was anything that, you know, that I didn't contemplate with him and say, okay, well, this is going to be difficult. How can we do this and that? And but there was off the top of my head, no, I can't readily think of something I had to say no to, but I'm sure there was.
Because we've all been at that place where like we just have to tell the director like this is not possible.
Yeah, well, and that's it. Sort of leads into sort of the art and the creativity, as I was talking before about being a UPM and knowing or understanding what the story is with the director, having those conversations, and getting a feel for what is important, what's not, and choosing your battles, and knowing where to place those resources. And when I say resources, usually money and crew and equipment on the set or preemptively on the set to make sure that they can get what they want. Just an example of that is totally away from Jim on a different movie, entirely different director. There was a scene in a big marketplace, and the director really wanted 1,000 people. And when I say 1,000 people, I'm being literal. He really wanted 1,000 people. These Asian markets that are over in the Far East, they are literally packed with thousands of people, and he wanted some really big wide shots to get 1,000 people, and there was no way logistically I could afford to, or budgetarily I could afford 1,000 people, or logistically how do I get 1,000 people there? Because I don't just think let's just get 1,000 people for this shot. I think, where are they going to go to the bathroom? Where are they going to sit? It's 1,000 chairs that I need to get. How am I going to feed all these people? How many extra PAs am I going to need to wrangle all these people? Wardrobe, they carry props, they have bags, they're shopping. How do I do all of that inside my budget? So obviously I had to pare it down. I think at the end we ended up with maybe 300 or 400 people in the scene.
Still a lot.
It's still a lot, but it's a far cry from 1,000. And but when you watch the scene, you would never know. It was basically I had to, have some meetings with. At that time, the first AD was on the project, so the first AD, the director, and the DP, and the production designer to map out this market that we were building from scratch anyway, so that we would have walkways large enough for the cranes. We had a big techno crane running down it. We had Steadicam all over the scene. So there was all those aspects that you had to think about that were practical, as opposed to us scouting real markets and him looking at the real markets that have alleyways and narrow that are only 2 people wide, and we needed them to be 5 people wide because we had dollies and other equipment and people with flags running down. And so there's the practicality part of it. So when it comes to that, that's the creative part of okay, how do we solve this problem and get what you need to make it look like thousands of people are at this market, but we really can only do it with 350 or 400 people. Right. So there's that creativity of it, and and little things like that too. Even on that project, that we were able to save little bits here and there, and I was able to add maybe, hey, that one scene, let's add 3 more booths. So let me give the art department a little bit more money to bring in more booths, put in more props, have some more set dressing. We can extend our market a little bit more, get that shot a little wider. And those are things that were done, honestly, sort of behind the scenes, even to the director when he showed up. It's this looks great. And he didn't necessarily know that I added 7 more booths, or the production designer got $10,000 more extra dollars because remember that scene the other day that we were able to tighten up on, that we can move that around. And those are things that you don't necessarily need to highlight. It needs to just
They don't care as long as it works.
As long as it works, it reads on camera and it's there. But it's all that creative stuff that you have to think about.
As far as your own involvement, that market scene, for example, how many shooting days did you spend?
1.
Yeah. 1?
1 day. Yeah.
What?
It was an all-day shoot and into the night. It was actually splits on that scene because there were day scene markets or day market scenes and night market scenes. So and the market reoccurs throughout the whole movie. So obviously wardrobe changes and different characters that are interacting and such. But it was all 1 day.
Why is it good for a director to get an actual line producer with experience rather than just a buddy with an Excel sheet?
Oh, I love that question. My mind is racing with all of the great reasons, but let me try to hone it down to if you, and I've dealt with this even just recently on some shows where I'm handed a budget that was done by someone who doesn't really have a lot of experience, and yeah, they've got some basics down, like they knew they needed a camera and some grip stuff, but where that fails oftentimes when you don't have someone who understands the nuances and the details is when it comes to looking at breaking down a script, because it always goes back to the script. You have to break down the script in its nuanced detail of understanding what are the elements in that scene. Not just the characters and the setting, but what are the props that are needed that carry over from other scenes? What's the set dressing like? Is it something that I can just go to IKEA and buy? Or is it something that's like higher end that I have to go to, some nicer, set dressing people have to go to some nicer place to get? That scale of understanding the money and how that aspects into it. And then understanding, okay, is that scene going to be on a set that we build, or is that a practical location? If it's a set, then I have to deal with the stage space rental. Where is that physically, that stage, and how close to is it with other things that we can potentially shoot? How long will it take me to build that stage and set dress it and paint it and wallpaper or whatever else we have to do with it? Does it have windows in it? Do I have to put up a cyc in the background, or are we going to, God forbid, blue screen it? That kind of stuff. There's all those kind of things that you have to think through, and all of those things equate to time, logistics, and money. And when you get someone who is not experienced enough to think about all those details, that you get a budget that's like, yeah, we're going to have a set, and it's going to cost $3,000. Like, well, how did you get to that number? One of my big clues, whenever you look, and this is a big clue for anybody, if you ever give me a budget to look at, is that if the top sheet ever ends, and any of the numbers ever end in 2 or 3 zeros, it's made up. It's just a big number that you've put in there.
Any of the line
Any
items.
of the numbers, on the top sheet, if any of those numbers end in 2 or 3 zeros, it's most likely a made up number.
Okay.
Because you haven't put in the detail to understand all those aspects that make up the bigger number. It's just a big allow. And that's the thing that I key in on a lot when you look at the detail of a budget. If there's just a bunch of allows, well, allow is great, but if you go in and say,
to clarify, allow is when you just put it in one line item saying, we'll allow $10,000 for the art department.
Exactly.
No breakdown on personnel or
exactly. And one of the big places that there's dozens of big places that people do it, but an example would be craft service. Okay, so you're doing a movie, and let's just say it's a $10 million movie, and you'll do a budget, and you'll say, craft service, allow $15,000. Now, legitimately, that might be the right number. You might be basing it on your experience on that kind of movie, and knowing about how much crew you have and the cast and how many days you're shooting, and hopefully you've contemplated the fact that you're not shooting in the desert, you need more water, or that you're shooting in a cold weather area and you need more hot soup and things like that. And you've probably done all that stuff, but most likely you haven't. This goes back to grade school math class, and your teacher always said what? She said, show your work. And I firmly believe that in doing a budget, that you show your work. If it's going to be $15,000 and you're shooting for 15 days, I'm just making up numbers, put in 15 days times $1,000 equals $15,000. At least then I understand when I'm looking at the budget how you got to that number.
Yeah.
Now, I would even go further to say, well, how do you get to $1,000? Are you putting a price on per head? $1,000 seems like a lot of money, but if you break down $5 a head times 150 people on your crew, that might not really work. No. And when you consider $5, is $5 really enough? When you consider the average person is going to drink 2 Cokes, but hopefully not more water, but they're going to have water too, and then they're going to grab some snacky bits off the truck. Some candy bars and some apples and bananas and stuff like that. So that's one person in the course of a day. Is all of that equal to $5? If so, then great, you're on. But if not, maybe you need to make it $6 or $7 or $8. And then also you have to think about things like, okay, well, if that's craft service, that's just the food. What about the materials that the craft service people need to do that? Are you going to have to rent a truck on a bigger show, or if it's on a smaller show, should you buy a couple of folding tables for them and maybe a dolly to help them move stuff around? And are you going to have to get a toaster oven, or all those things come into play? And of course you can hire craft service people that come with all that gear, but then that's another question, like, do they have a kit rental? They'll come with all the gear, but you have to pay them an extra $100 a day for their kit. Totally reasonable, but if it's not in there, where, going back to your question of why should a director get an experienced UPM or line producer to put together that schedule, is that at the end of the day, when that inexperienced person would put forth that budget and say, we can do this movie for, and I'm making up a number, $10 million or $1 million or whatever, or $80 million. And it's not detailed out, and then suddenly later you go like, oh yeah, I have to get this. Oh, I forgot that. Oh yeah, we want to do this. Oh, I didn't even think about where the Jenny's going to go on the location, because it's an apartment building and I have to maneuver it in. So I need to rent it for an extra day just to bring in the Jenny, or have an extra day of rental. Like, a lot of people will look at a schedule and say, well, we're only shooting that scene for one day. Well, that's true, but your set dressing people need to have it the day before, or maybe even 2 days before, to take out what's in there. We need to store that somewhere and put in our dressing. And so there's like, okay, well then that location isn't just one day, it's 4, 2 days to prep, 1 day to wrap, 1 day to shoot. And then what does all that mean? Okay, now you have to have your location liaison on there, or another locations PA to manage,
You need the
to
Jenny
be there.
Operator.
Yeah,
Are they union or non-union?
Yeah, there's all those aspects that come into it. And every one of those things has a line item, and every line item has some money on it. If it's $1, it's $1. If it's $18,000, it's $18,000. But you need to have that detail in there in order to make a quality, cognitive production plan. And when you get people that are inexperienced, it's harder. And I'll say this too: everyone's going to learn. It's not like my first budget was perfect, but you learn from it. And but if you're going to instill that kind of responsibility of doing a budget and production plan to someone who doesn't have that much experience, then the adage of you get what you pay for is going to be evident at the end of the day. So, that's.
To editorialize for a minute too, I agree, because we're moving further. I think with business models, and I did a whole rant on this a couple weeks ago, we are moving more and more towards like a Kickstarter model, where the producers and directors are getting their money from a set of, Kickstarter, crowdfunding, angel investors, and it's very limited funds. And they don't have a studio, they don't have a bank, they can't go back to the well for more money. It's just flat out, this is what you have to work with, no ifs, ands, or buts. And we're moving more and more towards a culture where all these films are getting crowdsourcing or whatever, crowdfunding up front, and it's all being picked up on the back end, if they're lucky, by like a Lionsgate to do video on demand release. And because of that, a good line producer is more and more necessary, because they find places to add production value where otherwise there wouldn't be. I don't know how to say this, but it just makes me so angry.
Well, the crowdsourcing phenomena, what I find interesting about it is that, and I've been involved with a few, and when I say involved in the sense of after the fact, after they've gone online and said, I want to do a movie for $1 million. Let's just say that they earned $1 million of everybody chipping in $10.
Yeah.
So they have $1 million, and then they come to me and they say, I have $1 million, I need to do this movie. And I'll say, that's great. You need $1.7 million to do this movie. So either you need to change the script a little bit, or scale back something, or decide that you are going to be able to lose this or that. So I say that as opposed to the more proper way to do it is to come to me first and say, we're looking at doing this project. What is the reality of it? Yeah. Now, if I then come back and say it's 1.7, and that's obviously made up numbers, 1.7, that you can then thereby determine what you want to cut or such, and then maybe bring it down to 1.2. But then when you go to your investors, quote unquote investors, the amorphic crowd of crowdsourcing, everyone else out there, you can go to them and say, hey, listen, we have a plan, and we can show you the budget, and this is how we're going to do it, and here's how we're going to spend $1.2 million. Yeah. Can you help us? As opposed to, and like I said, opposed to the opposite way. It just is more difficult. And like when I say I've been involved, I've had people come to me after the fact and said, hey, we want to do these shorts, and we have $500,000, and I said, okay, well, just your labor is going to cost you $439,000, and you haven't rented a prop, you haven't gotten a location, you haven't paid a cast member yet.
That's if they do union, or what? How big are these?
No, totally non-union.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
In this aspect. So, and that sort of segues to something else I should just point out, in the sense of putting together that production plan. And I work on budgets that are, my largest budget that I've ever worked on is $143 million. Mm-hmm. I just last week finished an $84 million project. So a lot of the work that I do is 25, 30 million plus. Mm-hmm. And I don't really work anymore in the lower budget, but I still have producers I work for at the $6, $7, $8 million range. But with that said, the aspect of going through the budget and figuring it out is so incredibly important to make sure that your plan is a viable one, that I can't stress it. I can't stress it more. So
how long does it take you to work on a budget of 30 million plus?
I would say pretty much any budget or production plan usually takes me about 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. It extends if it's an international project, because just inherently it's harder to get, unless it's a country that I've been to before. Mm-hmm. It's just inherently hard to get feedback on information, rates, and understanding what's there, because you're trying to deal with a film commissioner, or you're trying to deal with other people that are local to get you the information. So it's a little bit harder. But budget and production plans are not something to schlock together too fast. It just inherently takes a day to read the script and make some notes, and then the next 2 or 3 days is you putting that into a breakdown program like Movie Magic scheduling, and then moving the strips around to get something that's viable, and totally wishful thinking of, if everything in the world was perfect, this would be an awesome schedule. But it at least gives you a template to work from, and then from there you start extrapolating that data into numbers and costs, and generating that budget. So, and just the budget itself takes a couple of days. So now I'm already a week and a half in, and now I have to give the preliminary version to the producers. They read, they give their notes, I make some tweaks, and now it's the Friday of the second week, and that's 2 weeks. So, and then the international just usually extends it out a little bit, just because of that communication factor. So, but I've worked on shows on budgets where I've worked for 2.5, 3 months, and I've worked on budgets that have to be done right away because, oh my gosh, we have an investor, and I've been able to kick it out in 5 or 6 days. It really just depends on the needs, but the comfortable level of making sure that you have time to think about things. For me, a big process is to work really hard on it and to get it all done, and then take half a day and not do anything with it. I'm going to walk away and let my mind do other things, because then you come back to it and you say, wait, okay, why is that there? It was a good idea to have that there before, but I see a little bit better now. You just clear your mind and be able to focus a little bit more. So that just takes time. If you're just pounding away at it, you might not see these things, and you have to give it time to organically coalesce.
Okay, well, here's one thing I want to ask you.
Yeah.
One of my weaknesses, and other line producers I've talked with at my range, is they feel that budgeting and scheduling for post-production is always a dilemma for them. How do you budget and schedule for post-production with the knowledge that you already have? Because, of course, you go out for bids, but then what are some of the key things that you have to think about in addition to those bids? Because bids are always, they always give you the pie in the sky rate and then hit you with hidden charges on the back end. So
they do, unless you know what to look for on the front end. And that comes into the aspect of understanding those details and being able to think it through. To answer that question, I should go back to a show that I did at Fox. It was called Incident at Loch Ness with Zach Penn and Werner Herzog. So when I was working on this project, I was the UPM. It was actually my first movie after working with Jim, and I was hired basically because of the water experience with working with Jim, because Incident at Loch Ness has a boat on water, and the producers thought that would be a good link. I digress, but to the point is that on that project, I was the UPM, and I hired my post supervisor, who is a longtime friend of mine and really knew post. But I said, here's a requirement of your employment, of me hiring you. A, you're going to make this much money because it's a small movie. And B, you only get one assistant. But I'm not going to take anything out of the budget for your assistant because your assistant's going to be me. And I'm not going to pay myself anything. Mm-hmm. I worked on that movie for about 5 months as the UPM and got paid my UPM rate at the time. And then I worked for about 5 months for free, totally free. I mean, I gave myself some lunches here and there, but totally free. And what that did for me, and the reason I did that, is that I was in the boat of the people that you're talking about, is that they don't understand post. Mm-hmm. And do I recommend that everybody goes out and works in post production? You might not have that capability. I had the luxury to do that, and but that led to me basically understanding that when I turn my stuff over to post production, what happens to it? How does it really get to the end result of me watching it in the theater? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of gray area, quagmire, mystery in there, and I was guilty back in the day. I mean, this is 11 years ago now. Mm-hmm. I was guilty back in the day of doing my budget to the detail that I do it, and then post-production would be kind of like, I don't know, maybe 800,000, maybe 300,000. It feels like that should be enough. But after I worked in it, I now feel very comfortable in talking about post-production, doing post-production, because since then, I've been the post supervisor on 7 films, bigger films. Mm-hmm. So, and commonly what I do is I'll be on a show, and there's a certain set of producers that I've worked with in the past over and over, mm-hmm. that they know that I'm going to shepherd this thing from the get-go to the end. Mm-hmm. So I stay on through the end, and I switch my role from UPM line producer to post supervisor. And the big thing with that is that I've seen the ability to, in pre-production, I'm thinking through things and how we're doing it and when we're doing the schedule and what we're shooting when, and I'm already thinking like, well, how is that going to affect post-production? Because I know that we need to deliver this shot earlier so visual effects can do their pulls and composites and figuring it all out, because I need that in this delivery window in order for editorial to be done within this span of time. Mm-hmm. So we can't shoot this scene and this sequence in the last week of shooting. Mm-hmm. We need to shoot it at the latest, the 5th week of shooting, and at the earliest, the 2nd week of shooting, because of logistics with locations or whatever. Mm-hmm. But if we can figure that out, then it helps post-production, as opposed to then increasing costs for another editorial bay to have editors come in and just do those visual effects editing, mm-hmm. and then telling the post house like, hey, or the visual effects house, hey, we need this shot done in a week, mm-hmm. as opposed to you have 3 weeks. You help mitigate costs. Everybody's a little bit more relaxed about it, as relaxed as you can be in post, and and knowing that the director has time to review it and isn't just left with the idea of like, well, yeah, I mean, it would be great to have an extra day or two to fix that, but it's fine. Let's just use it. Mm-hmm. Now you are able to hopefully potentially give that extra day or two and say, let's fix that. Mm-hmm. So working in post-production is really great. What I've always suggested to people, if they don't have that capability of being the post supervisor or being even a PA, and I'll digress for a second and say, being a PA is not a bad thing. Mm-hmm. I say this to I've talked to a lot of students, and I've been to seminars and stuff where I've said, like, what's your best advice for breaking in? And being a PA is okay. You get access to so much. You see a lot of stuff. You get to comment on stuff. You depending on the level of interactivity with your producers, you're able to really be a key aspect of the project. So mm-hmm. being a PA gives you a lot of knowledge. So going back to post-production, one of my big pieces of advice is, what post house are you using? Mm-hmm. I guarantee you that they will bend over backwards to have you come in and meet with them, talk to their engineers, understand the process that's going through. And that way, when they give you a bid, and it's just this wall of text gobbledygook that has numbers on it, and you're like, well, do I need a DCDM? Well, I just need DCP. Well, I don't understand. Okay, well, do I need all that stuff? Like, yes, and here's why. In order to get to that point, you need to do these masters. And how are you going to color time? Is it better to project or to be on a screen, on a flat screen? What's the titling situation, and how does that work? How do subtitles even get on a movie? How do you turn those off when you do master outs and stuff like that? So all those little details and the color timing and all that stuff, you need to understand how it works. And even if you can't have the ability to go into a post house, there's got to be some movie that you've done or worked on, or friends of yours that say, hey, can I come in and just sit in on a session on a day of color timing so I can understand what is capable in color? That way when we're on the set, we can know that that's not going to be a thing. We can change it. We can do that. And of course, nobody likes to hear the "we'll fix it in post" line. That's
bullshit.
Well, it's not as much that. It's more of the issue of it's a lazy man's cop out, in the sense of, oh, we'll just do it then. I was on a project where far off in the distance there was a piece of glass on a windshield that was glinting and kind of messing up the shot, because we're supposed to be in the middle of nowhere and there wasn't supposed to be anything out there. But we could see, the camera couldn't pick it up, but we saw the glint of the sun. And so I then suddenly got the idea the request from one of the camera people to we'll just erase that in post and just do a visual effect on the shot. And me as the UPM, my first thought is, that's a couple $1,000s that I don't have. We can wait. In that the cost of us waiting per minute breakdown is much less than doing that. So let's just wait for like 3 minutes for the Earth to rotate, and that glint will go away, and then we can shoot our shot. And during these 3 minutes that we wait, let's talk about what we're doing next. We have some time now that we cannot do anything because we're waiting for the actual Earth to rotate. So let's talk about what we're doing next. What's our next setup? Where are we going to do? Let's use our time wisely. And of course, I will say, on the set, when you start talking about that, it's a lot of people get all like, "Wait, what? Why are you?"
Yeah.
But I did win that in just trying to explain to them that I don't have the money for visual effects, and also, by the way, I love your enthusiasm and your go-get-itness, and you're willing to think outside the box, but you don't get to make those decisions that we just turn this shot into a visual effects shot. It's just not. It's not your call. So understanding that and knowing how to use post-production to your benefit is a powerful tool. So on my budgets, I'm very comfortable in post-production. It's no longer I guess we need maybe $2 million. Like it's, I know we need $2.7 million. This will do it. The always quasi area is music, really. That's the only part that really becomes kind of iffy for me. But I know some good clearance houses, and I've talked to them, and I have a feeling for like, okay, you're going to put a Britney Spears song in there with lyrics and the music, and you're going to make it run for a minute and a half. That's going to be $180,000. It's, you sort of get the feeling of like, okay, well, you're going to put this much in. And that's usually a big line item that producers, when they're reviewing the budget, they're like, oh my gosh, music is $500,000. I'm like, yeah, you've got 7 tracks in your movie, and 3 of them are the Beatles. And you just have to get a feeling, as opposed to, you have the scenes where, we're driving in the car and the characters are just switching channels. Well, they switch the channels 6 times. That's 6 things that we have to hear. And maybe 4 of them are songs, but even that 2-second snippet of the song is going to cost us maybe $20,000. Yeah. Maybe we can put 2 of those songs as sort of like it's just a jingle that we then get as a freebie or something that we can pay for $600.
Every time in movies you go through the stations, always one is like some cheap mariachi band. So
I haven't noticed that. The one that I notice mostly is whenever people get into an elevator, is The Girl from Ipanema. And if I ever direct a movie ever and I have an elevator scene, it is absolutely The Girl from Ipanema. So I love the fact that when movies have that, it's just so random, out of the blue. But It's almost like the stunt scene that always has to have the car crash into the fruit stand.
Yes.
You have the elevator with the girl from Ipanema. So, and it's funny, as I said, the fruit stand thing. I was just reading a script the other day where I was starting to break it down, and literally the car goes in the fruit stand out of the blue, and I'm like, really, the fruit stand? Like, okay. So, and it wasn't a comedy. It wasn't supposed to be like a self, aware movie of like, this is funny, haha. No, it's like, really, this is a fruit stand. So, I'm like, oh my gosh. So. Anyway, we need to come up with a new fruit stand. But Girl from Ipanema needs to stay. That's awesome.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Actually, on music, I thought they only charge per needle drop on those contracts. And the runtime of the song actually doesn't matter.
It's how much you use.
Okay.
Yeah, it's usually how much you use if you're using original lyrics. Sometimes even if you're using the original music bed. I've done a film. One of the films that I did, we got the license. The license for the actual bed of music from the original song that we wanted. We timed it out, and I worked closely with the director to say, like, you need to preemptively tell me how long the scene is going to be, and I'm going to add 5 seconds to it, and then I need to go quote that. And I think that they wanted something around $60,000 or $70,000 for that sequence. And I said, okay, and this is one of those creative things again. I said, okay, we can't afford $70,000 on this movie. I can afford 10.
Yeah.
How do I get it to 10? And what we came up with was we're gonna, in the scene in the background, we're not gonna have it just playing on the speakers in the bar. We're gonna have a live band, and that live band isn't gonna be syncing with something that we put in later. We're gonna actually find a local band that can play that song, and we'll record them quiet, actually playing the song that we then lay in later with all of our Foley and Walla chatter. And we're going to have the lead singer of that band actually sing the lyrics. So now I go back to the music clearance company and say, okay, we just need the cover rights for the baseline music, sheet music, and we're going to put in our own vocals, and we're going to play it ourselves. So we're going to give it a little bit extra rendition of our own. We're going to tweak a little bit. And that we got for, I think at the end of the day, we paid $15,000 for that. And it's a lot better than 70.
Yeah.
And the scene has an extra little flair because, the scene now starts on the band leader, and then we, dolly over, and now we see our people in the background, and we cut to our scene. So now it's a little bit extra flair.
That's smart.
It's creative, and we work through it. And, so that it's those things that are like, you have to think outside the box of saying, and that movie was $7 million. Had it been an $80 million movie, I'm sure that I would have lost completely, and we would have put just the music in and paid $70,000. And when I say lost, I mean it wouldn't have been a challenge that I would have had to worry about.
Yeah,
I would just okay, that's what we do, and put it in. So, but yeah, and so it's those kind of things that you have to think about. A, thinking outside the box, and B, music wise, that's always the the area, especially in even in my budgets, that when you're paying for needle drops, when you're doing the breakdown of the movie, you have to think about that stuff, and even stuff that's not written on the movie or in the script. There's going to be an opening title sequence song. Is that going to be score, or is this a movie that takes place in the 70s and it's about some hipsters, and they're going to put in some Art Simon and Garfunkel stuff? Well, if that's the case, you need to plan for that. And in your budget, you don't allow $100,000 for music. You want to put in opening title track, needle drop, allow, then that they say, or one allow, and that particular song you're going to say, let's allow $50,000 for that. You haven't researched it yet, because in order to research it, you have to spend money at the clearance house to have them go to research it. But if you start to get a feel for how much those things are, then it helps your budget be a little more realistic. So, and it's okay to I've detailed these 7 drop tracks or needle drops out, but I think that it might not be enough just overall. Let me put in a slush fund. In that case, it's okay to just put in one more line that says allow additional $15,000, and that gives you a little bit that you can put here or put there, and it doesn't siphon you in. Of course, if you're doing a $800,000 movie, you might not have $15,000 to just slush it in there.
Yeah,
but if you're doing a $50 million movie or more, then you might be able to add in a little bit extra, just to give yourself a little wiggle,
Mm-hmm.
and you know that you can come back and cut that down later, or
See, I do something
move it around.
similar like that with like allow additional for salary for actors specifically, because a business model, or excuse me, a budget model I was told a while ago was, for $1 million budget, say you have one TV persona lead who you pay $15,000 bonus to, and then another supporting persona who you pay $5,000, and they're both from TV actors, or I forget exactly what it was, but I just put in one additional line item for allow additional star talent tier 1, or allow additional star talent tier 2. And then, but the thing is, you have to, you don't know which of the roles is going to get that star talent paycheck. So then you have to factor in, okay, is this the SAG person or SAG core or et cetera? So,
yeah. It's one aspect. The only caution I would give to you to do that is make sure that you, on that additional line item, that you fringe it.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to just say, okay, well, this person is making X amount, and then I'm going to add in $5,000 extra, and then that's not fringed.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you're missing 36% extra money somewhere in the budget that you're like, I don't know why this isn't adding up. You didn't fringe that extra line. But I actually do that too. My only, and hopefully none of the casting directors that I work with will listen to this. Of course, I hope they do, but I hope that they'll just stop listening for the next 20 seconds. In my budgets, I usually budget out properly for each cast member, but even in my usually supporting actors, the main actors are usually like, okay, they're gonna make $1 million, $1.5 million, whatever, and you budget appropriately in case it includes or does or does not include your agent fees and all those other fringes and taxes and stuff. But yeah, I'll put in a slush fund that says, give me an extra $100,000 spare to move around, so that the casting director has some, if they can't get someone, like, oh, you need an extra, $5,000 or $10,000 to lock in that person, come to me and ask me, and I'll try to find it. I'm using the quote fingers. I'll try to find it. Yeah. But I don't tell them that I have that slush fund, because they don't get a copy of the budget. I just tell them what's in the budget. And then they'll come back to me, and I can then move that around. And ultimately, hopefully, I can move that money completely out of casting and put it down there. But it does give you a little bit of extra room to wiggle when you're making those contract negotiations. But even with that extra money, my first advice is to try to budget those people properly. Like,
absolutely.
If you've done the schedule, and if you've done all the work and figuring out how long they're going to work, and they're going to work there for 3 weeks, budget them for 3 weeks, and be right about it. Now, the only time that comes into play is like, okay, well, this character is number 16 on the cast list. He's not a bigger character, but the director would really like this character actor to play it, and it's a character actor that we all know and recognize. Well, he's probably not going to work for just simply $12,000 total or whatever. Yeah. He might do it for 20. So that $8,000 extra that I need to cycle in, where's that coming from? So it's those kind of things that, those little bit parts that, like, cameos.
Right.
Of like, okay, this is someone that's not huge, not a big character in our movie, but it's someone that I really would like this person for, and they might not work for just scale. So
gotcha.
you need that extra bit.
Are there any positions that you're covering except for PAs that are non-union these days, or if?
Well, yeah, there's PAs. Those are the main ones.
Yeah. Because I actually did a budget. They wanted to do all union in Chicago. A couple months ago, and I was stunned at what the unions covered and which unions covered which. Like, locations manager was
DGA.
Sorry?
In Chicago.
Oh, in Chicago it's DGA.
In DGA.
I'm sorry, I'm conflating two budgets. I did one in Chicago, and then a couple months prior to that, I did one in LA. In LA, location managers are Teamsters.
Teamsters. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, totally true. And casting directors are Teamsters as well. So yeah, you have to. There's a lot of those back and forth, and when you start talking about budgeting around the country, around the world is even more complex. But the states have its own set of complexities, and things like, okay, I'm going to go to Louisiana. It's an area standards IATSE contract area, but you need to use the fringes for the New York office on wardrobe and makeup and hair. Don't quote me on this, but I believe it's also production coordinators that use the New York local stuff. So you need to know who's working from where, and then even when you start talking about rates, they're not necessarily all easily identifiable inside their contracts, depending on what tier low budget you're using or the ASA standard agreement. So you need to know.
I'm sorry, ASA?
Area Standards Agreement.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you need to know who you're using as far as crew and where they're from and where they're working. And even when it comes to fringes, like if you're hiring someone from LA to then go to Louisiana, are you fringing them? What are you fringing them for California, and what you're fringing them for Louisiana? And there's aspects that you need to understand about that, because it can be the difference of, per person, it could be a difference of a couple of $1,000s, but then you magnify that over 35 people that you are hiring times 12 weeks, it's suddenly, as you're talking tens of thousands of dollars that you're either wrong or missing, or that kind of thing, or you're over budget, which is also a bad thing to do, to over budget something, because then nobody wants to get to the end of the movie and then say, oh, I have an extra $250,000, because then every time that you had said no to the director or no to the producers, they're going to look at you and say, why couldn't we do that aerial shot? Why couldn't we shoot an extra 3 days? Why, and then you have no answers. Like, you don't want to win that way. You want to win on budget. So,
is it a bad strategy to, if you find conflicting rates, to go with the higher one in your initial budget estimates, and then once you're in your first week of prep, to sit down with the production accountant and figure out where the discrepancies are?
No, I never, as long as it's not egregiously different in the sense of the rates. So you're talking like $30 an hour versus $31.50. Put in the $31.50. That just gives you more wiggle room at the end, or you've used the correct one. If you just put in the $30 rate, hoping to get your budget down a little bit, I mean, $150 times your 14 pay hours a day times X number of days that person is working is going to add up. It's not going to be super significant, but it's going to be a couple $100, and that's a couple $100 is not in the budget. So you have to suddenly find that from somewhere. Where is it coming from? So yeah, I often default to using the higher thing, and I know that that's a place that I can negotiate down or double check. So, but yeah, the accountant at a certain point would be the person to go to. I usually just talk directly to the guilds and the unions and find out from them, like, I need a copy of this contract so I can make sure the rates are proper. Is this, and then also locals, not just the national contracts, but the locals sometimes, like West Virginia is one in particular that I've worked with that, the ASA is fine, but if you start talking about the wardrobe people in that particular city, in that district, they have a slightly different pay scale. Sometimes a little higher, sometimes a little lower. And then you start talking about, like, well, do I have to give them a stipend because they're coming in, or do I have to give them full per diem and housing? So all those things come into play that you really need to do your research on where you're shooting specifically.
Well, we've pretty much run over the hour. Anything else you want to talk about, or?
No. I mean, the overall thing I just say that to anyone who's out there who wants to be a UPM or line producer is, take your time. Learn the skills that you need to do it. Don't get discouraged if you're right out of college or you're a PA and you're suddenly like, I want to be UPM, that you're not the UPM on the very next show. I worked for many years to get the knowledge that I have and understand the dynamics of what's quote unquote underneath me, as far as the hierarchy of me being a UPM and all the positions that I have to oversee and manage. It takes a while. I worked in other departments. I've pushed dolly. I've pulled focus on camera. I've worked in a wardrobe department. I was an accounting clerk. It's okay to take those side jaunts and do that. You might find out that you don't want to be a UPM. You really want to work in a wardrobe, or whatever. But that aside, if your focus is to be a UPM, it gives you so much knowledge later on that when you're doing a breakdown or when you're dealing with the wardrobe department on a set, you have a basis to understand where they're coming from. And so I can't stress more to get as much experience as you can in various places. Of course, read books, but talk to people. And when you're on the set, don't lose the opportunity to just walk over to people and say, hey, I'm not really clear on what exactly this is that you're doing or how this thing works. Can you give me the 3-minute overview? Like, just so I can understand why that is. And then you never know, in 2 or 3 years, you're going to be like, hey, hold on. There was this one movie where we used this thing. It was cool. I forget what it's called, but and then suddenly, oh, that's the bleh. And then suddenly you're brilliant because you thought of it. And really all it was you took 3 minutes to learn about something, and now it helps out. So get that knowledge. Be okay with, earning your stripes, as you will, cutting your teeth.
And that's all, folks. Many thanks to my guest, Stephen Marinaccio, for a terrific interview. Check out his website, www.lineproducing.com, which is celebrating its 10-year anniversary now. You can also find out more about Film USA and more by visiting the links for this episode on our website, including Stephen's charity, Hollywood ABC. Our music this week is Sunburst by Producers Lounge fan Charles Tomasz. Please check out his website at www.charlestomasmusic.com. We're starting to grow our Producers Lounge community, so if you'd like to submit either jazz music or banner photos for an episode, post a link on our Facebook page. You can like us on Facebook at facebook.com/theproducerslounge. Remember, you show your support for films by not downloading them, you show your support on Hulu by clicking on the commercials, and you show your support for podcasts by liking and commenting. And you can always check out our website, www.theproducersloungepodcast.com. Thank you again. I'm your host, Richard Tucci. Join us next week for more cocktails and questions. And until then, keep producing dreams.